Good morning and a welcome to In Conversation with Hemali. It's a big hello from Singapore. Finding a complete cosmology in the ancient Puranic texts, mostly aligned to the view of cutting-edge science, is incredible. Wouldn't you all agree with me? I'm sure you would. Well, with me is the author of the book From the Beginning of Time, Modern Science and the Puranic Universe, Mr. Ganesh Swaminathan from Singapore. An engineer from IIT Delhi, he has had an interest in astronomy ever since he was in school. After completing his MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, he spent most of his professional life working in the technological sector. Years ago, Mr. Ganesh developed an interest in the Puranas. He was fascinated by the insights of the ancient texts and the parallels to the space science. He has researched most of his Mahapuranas while preparing to author his book. Welcome, Mr. Ganesh, and thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me and to grace the channel.
Thank you very much, Hemali. Thanks very much for hosting me on your channel, and it's wonderful to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So, Mr. Ganesh, I'm going to straight start with my questions, and I would like you to tell us a little more about your book and what it covers.
So you started off by saying that the book, is an amalgamation of the Puranas and modern science.
Right.
I thought maybe it might be useful for your viewers to get a general understanding of the Puranas. Mm-hmm. And sure. Most of us understand the Puranas to be a collection of stories. Yeah, some even think it's mythology. Actually, the Puranas can be looked upon as an encyclopedia of knowledge, right? And It's not an encyclopedia that we think of today, which has, all the, everything that's in alphabetical order, but it is a combination of text, of description, and of stories, right? So just to make it very readable and very accessible to the ordinary person 2000 years ago, remember, right? So I think that will kind of put the Puranas in context. And I don't blame anybody for thinking the Puranas are a collection of stories. I personally thought they were just a collection of stories. Yes. And we grew up with stories, right? From our childhood, they were told to us by our parents, by our grandparents. Some of us have read Amar Chitra Katha. They have stories from there. So it's not out of line that we think, if we think so. Yeah. However, there's a lot more detail to it. And the Puranas have a lot of science. They have a lot of knowledge. They have like things like medicine, which is science, right? They have geography and so on. And they have the science of music that we normally don't think of as a science. Wow. Right? They talk about that. And so they cover a wide range. Different Puranas spend more time on different topics. Right. And cosmology is one of the many. So the movement of the sun, the origin of the universe, the movement of the planets is one of the many topics that are covered in the Puranas. And the book tries to uncover the references to the origin of the universe, to the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets, and how they relate to modern science. So there's a lot of cosmology in the Puranas. In all humility, the book covers maybe 20%. So the cosmology is about 10% of the Puranas. The book that I've written covers maybe about 10 to 20% of the cosmology. So a very small portion of what is really an ocean of knowledge that the Puranas are. So I hope that gives your readers a sense for what the book is all about.
Sure, wonderful. So I'm sure a lot of research must have gone into finding out and putting it across to an audience like me, who is a layman and who doesn't really know. And we have always, like you said, grown up believing that these are stories. So what did you find from your research? Is there really a link between modern science and the Puranas? And if yes, how can we even prove that?
Okay. So first thing is, the book doesn't prove it, right? So that's one thing that I want to say. What the book does is that the book lays out two narratives. It lays out, for example, let's take the origin of the sun, of the life cycle of the sun.
Okay.
It lays out entirely the science of the life, the current scientific understanding of the life cycle of the sun.
Right.
And then what it does is it tells you the Puranic description. So it gives you both of these and lays them out side by side and lets the reader decide. So there is no forcing the reader to say, you have to accept this, saying, hey, reader, draw your own conclusions. These are so close to each other, it would be very surprising if they were not identical, right? So that's the approach of the book.
That's what you found from the research that you did, right?
That's from the research that I did, right? And so it covers topics such as the life cycle of the sun. So the word Purana itself means ancient. In Sanskrit, it's a Sanskrit word, ancient. And so it talks about events deep in the Earth's past, right? So it talks so the sun is obviously many billions of years old, right? So it talks about the birth of the sun. It talks about the history of the Earth, right? It talks about the history of the Earth and it talks about in terms of the Manvantara, Kalpa, which is the biggest cycle, the Manvantara and the Chaturyuga.
Okay.
So it's pretty accurate timings. The book talks about the origin of the moon, and it talks about the description of the planets. And so there's a lot that I found in the Puranas that I thought I should share with the readers so that they are aware of it, and they may have a different opinion, right? So I wanted to make sure that it was widely shared and people can form their own opinions of these treasure of knowledge.
Sure, must have been. So can you please share with us, say, a small story that you must have kind of, that would make us believe in the connection between the Puranas and the space science, something to kind of make us believe?
Okay. So once again, so I'll not talk about a story, Hemali. What I'll talk about is a part of the life cycle of the sun. So I talked to you about the life cycle of the sun a couple of minutes back.
Life cycle of the sun?
Of the sun, right? And so most of us know the sun. Every morning we see it and it blesses our day.
Yes.
We don't think of it as having a life cycle, but the sun is one of the billions of low mass stars in our universe, and like every star, it is born. It has you'd be surprised, it has a juvenile phase, just like you have teenagers running all over the place. You have a juvenile phase. You have the current mature phase of a star that we see, the sun in the sky. After about 4 to 5 billion years of that, you have the red giant stage, right? Okay. And then you have a white dwarf stage where it basically collapses and dies. So what is amazing is that the Puranas talk about each of these stages, right? So I'm not going to describe the whole life cycle of the sun. It would take too long. I'd love to, but I think it would take too long. And viewers can go to my YouTube channel where I have a detailed presentation on this, and if they wanted to inform themselves. So I'll talk to you about just one stage of the sun, right? And this is the red giant stage. It starts it is estimated to start about 4 billion years from now. So nothing that we need to worry about.
Right.
But because of a series of events, what happens is that the sun grows enormously in size. It can grow from up to 50 to 100 times its size. Okay. And it becomes so big that the planets of Mercury and Venus actually get inside the sun. So the sun becomes so big that it's outside the orbits of Mercury and Venus, right? So it just swallows up. And the surface of the sun is very close to the Earth now, right? Because it's beyond Venus. And it becomes so hot. The Earth becomes so hot because it is in close proximity of the sun that it almost begins to glow, right? Because it's so hot.
It's so hot, yeah.
Yeah. And the Puranas describe it, the Brahmanda Purana describes this in amazing detail, right? And so the description starts when the sun just begins to grow a little bit, right? In the early stages, when it grows, I'm going to paraphrase here, I'm not going to cite the exact verses, but it says that the earth becomes very hot, it starts to get hot, and it begins with an enormous amount of drought, right? So there is a drought on the planet, and there is not enough water. And as the sun grows bigger and bigger and bigger and gets closer to the earth, the oceans evaporate, the rivers evaporate, everything becomes dry. Polar ice caps melt, the snow caps in the mountains melt, all the water basically evaporates and goes into the atmosphere.
Sure.
And then as it gets even hotter, it becomes extremely hot, and some of the solar flares can come from the surface of the sun and kind of sweep through the earth, right? And they are millions of degrees, and they'll just fry anything that's on the surface of the earth. So even bodies of plants and animals and birds and insects and so on,
Everything
it
is
turns into dust, and the water from there goes into the atmosphere. So it's absolutely dry and burnt. And the Puranas describe the earth as beginning to glow, literally, right? There is actually a phrase that describes that both in the Brahmanda Purana and the Skanda Purana. It's amazing, really, how they can think about it. And then the sun moves into its white dwarf stage where it just collapses because of the, again, very scientifically well defined. It goes into a white dwarf stage where it collapses. And when it collapses, it no longer produces any heat. And so the earth that was extremely hot now starts to get very cold. And when you have all this water vapor in the atmosphere and the earth starts to get cold, it forms clouds. It forms large clouds, and it rains and it rains. So the entire water that went from the surface of the earth into the atmosphere now comes back to the surface of the earth. And the earth becomes submerged. And that is the pralaya. You might have heard of the word pralaya.
Yes.
The flood. And this is the, so you see you see the description in the Puranas match science extremely closely. And these are not stories. So there are no gods or kings or queens or asuras or nothing. It's just described as a text, as a textbook would describe it.
This leaves me in awe, absolutely. Meaning, right from today, I may stop saying stories completely, because this one example also makes me believe that, all right, this is reality, this is science. Wow, very well explained, Mr. Ganesh. Thank you so much for this one. And to reach out, because Puranas are written in such a language where people like us may not even understand what it's trying to say. So to reach out to a larger audience, you must have had to work hard on the language that you use in writing the book, and to explain what exactly you understand. So can you share your experience with us? How did you plan to make it easier for an audience to read and understand?
That's a good question, Hemali. And I want to start by saying that at no point in my life did I ever thought I would write a book.
Is that right? Wow.
Never, not ever. And so I have no formal training as a writer. I used to enjoy reading. I was a voracious reader as a child, but I never trained on how to write a book. It has its own techniques and so on. But when I read all of these about the Puranas, I felt compelled to share this knowledge, right? Because it is something that I think is, to my mind, quite amazing, really.
Absolutely.
And so I structured it the best way I could, and I typed it up and corrected the grammar, and I felt quite satisfied with myself. And then I read it. I read the script, and I said, I am not going to pay 10 cents to buy this book, let alone somebody else buying it.
Wow. All right. And then?
Because I just put all my thoughts down without any sequence or anything. So I had to get down to saying, okay, I have done a lot of research on the Puranas. I've done a lot of research on the sun, the earth, the moon, and so on. Most people lead perfectly happy lives without knowing anything about these, right? And so I have to simplify it as best as I have to first get it down to its core. So remember, I have to first describe the science, and then I have to describe the Puranas in the framework of the science, right?
Right.
So I had to simplify it as much as get down to what is the core that I wanted to communicate. So that's the one thing that I had to stay focused on.
Right.
And then try and say it as simply as possible. And then once I had written that, I had to read it over and over and over again and rewrite it so that it's as simple as possible. And I must have run through some 10 or 15 drafts of this. And like I said, I'm not a trained writer. At some point in time, I had to realize that I'm not adding much more value. even though a better writer, I'm sure, could have done a better job. And I had to just let it go. So
that's very modest of you to say, because when I, when I was reading up about you and trying to understand, what did you do? And I went up to read on Amazon.com about the reviews that people have kind of written. And I was absolutely amazed at the number of people who have written their reviews, and of which most of them say that it has been written in a very clear, crisp, simple language for anyone to understand. So congratulations to you, Mr. Ganesh, on that one.
Thank you very much. I worked very hard on it, and I don't want to make it sound like it was a great effort. It was a labor of love. I enjoyed every moment of it, right? I mean, obviously, it took a lot of time, but I feel blessed at having done this, and I enjoyed every moment of it. And I too read the comments on Amazon, and for all the effort that has gone into it, it's wonderful to read those comments because they really make it worth it, right? They really make it worth it.
I really like the use of words labor of love, for the book. That's such a wonderful thing to say, right? And so what was it that made you kind of delve into this topic? I do know that you had an interest in astronomy, but how did it turn to an interest on this topic? And what kept you going on to do the research? Because that must have taken a lot of time and effort, labor of love.
It's true. Due to a combination of events, I started reading my first Purana, right? And there's too many things. It would take me a long time to go. So let me kind of cut through the chase. I was having a chat with a friend in Singapore many years ago, and he told me that he was reading the Egyptian version of the flood story. So we all know the flood story, the most widely known flood story, the story of Noah and the ark.
Yes.
And this is many years ago, and he said, I'm reading the story of the Egyptian version of the story, and I don't know if you or your readers are familiar, it's an ancient Egyptian work called the Epic of Gilgamesh. So just in response to it, without any knowledge, I told him, oh, there is an Indian version to it as well. And I think it's called the Matsya Purana. Now, I never read the Matsya Purana, but I just kind of said it.
Really?
So before, we started going back and forth, and he said, oh, I'm going to read the Epic of Gilgamesh, and you read the Matsya Purana, and then we'll compare notes. So before the evening was over, I was committed to reading it, basically. And I was interested in reading it, so I ordered my first copy, and I had it delivered in India. I used to travel to India to visit my family. And I started reading the Matsya Purana. That's the first Purana I read. And I didn't know what to expect. None of us knows what to expect, right? I mean, most of us had heard about the Puranas, few of us have read it. And I thought it would just be a collection of stories about gods and goddesses and rishis and, and so on and so forth. I found it to be a text of amazing sophistication. Using the word sophistication for a 2,000-year-old text sounds strange. But let me give you an example. So I had not even gone to page 100. I came across a story where it talks about a king and his how he was ruling, and it says something like the notion of political economy had not emerged as yet. And I was thinking the two words politics and economy had been put together very recent, a couple of 100 years ago by a French philosopher. How did this concept find its way into a text that is 2,000 years old? That was one thing, and there were other things, and obviously references to astronomy as well, which I found fascinating. And so I just read I mean, people kind of think, how did you read a 1,500 page Purana?
Right.
I said, no problem. I read through it. It was just fascinating reading.
Wow.
Now, Hemali, I didn't stop there. I was so interested, I immediately ordered the Shiva Purana, and I read the Shiva Purana. And then I ordered the Bhagavata Purana. I read the Bhagavata Purana. And then I stopped because it was hard to get prints of the other Purana. And I thought I had given up. And I was doing some research in the web, and I found a copy of the Brahmanda Purana, right, as a PDF. And so I thought, this is wonderful. So you won't believe it. I just downloaded the whole Brahmanda Purana and printed out some 1,500 pages of it. And I said, okay, I'm going to start reading it. And I read the Brahmanda Purana, then I read the Kalika Purana, then I read the Devi Purana, and now I'm reading the Markandeya Purana. And I'm fascinated still. And I don't think I'm done yet. And I hope to read more. And every time I read, I had to stop reading because I had to write this book, because there was such a lot that I had kind of understood, or, from the Puranas, that I said, this is very distracting. I have to get this communicated out, and then I can continue my work at reading again. Right. And so I had to stop reading literally, so that, and start collecting my thoughts, and then go back and start validating the science again, right? Because first thing is, I'm not an expert on the sun. I had to teach myself. I'm not an expert on the moon. I had to teach myself. Though I was familiar with a lot of the concepts, right?
Right.
And so I had to stop reading. I had to start researching, right? Because again, the book also, what it does, the book doesn't just say, oh, the Purana talks about this. The book actually cites specific verses. So the verse, and all of it is in English, right? These are translations which is sponsored by the government of India somewhere in the 50s and the 60s. So the government of India appointed a board of scholars. They didn't just find one person. They appointed a whole board of scholars, team of scholars, who were familiar with Sanskrit, the Shastras, and so on.
Right.
And they asked them as a project to go and translate the Puranas into English.
Okay.
And it was also at that point in time supported by UNESCO, right? So international. So I use these texts, and what I do is I take a verse from the text and put it in the book and say, as a part of the narrative, right? So that the reader doesn't just have to take my word for it, right?
Sure.
And the verse is not just cited as a verse. The verse is cited along with the Purana that it is from, the chapter, the section, the book, and the verse. Right? So they can exactly find the verse and satisfy themselves that what they are reading is right. And the book quotes over a dozen different Puranas. Right? It's not just one Purana that it quotes over a dozen different Puranas, because I researched the other all the Mahapuranas preparatory writing book, right? So it was a lot of effort, and I'm still fascinated, and I would like to continue reading, and I still read now.
You would like to continue dwelling into it, right?
Right. Fascinated.
So, Mr. Ganesh, I would like to request you to leave a message behind for the viewers. And I also, before that, I would also like to, I have a question in my mind, and that is that I've heard that the Puranas ask us to question, not just take things, as you read.
Yes,
is that right?
Actually, that's very true. Actually, what you say, Hemali, is common to most of our texts. For example, if you take a look at the Bhagavad Gita, it is a question and answer between Krishna and Arjuna. You look at many of the Upanishads, it is a question and answer between the seeker and the guru, right?
Right.
So the concept of questioning is not alien to our scriptures. Unlike many scriptures in many religions, it says, this is what the book says, please believe it. There is actually an active process of back and forth between the seeker and the guru, right? Which is inherent. Now, this is already there, but I was surprised to find a verse in the Brahmanda Purana that actually calls this out. And I can't quote it, so I'm going to paraphrase it for you. So it says, the Brahmanda Purana says that there are 4 sources of knowledge, of information. There is the scriptures, obviously, which is a very important source of knowledge and information. The inference, perception, and reasoning, right? So what you see, what you can infer, and what you can reason,
right?
But the Purana says, the verse says, don't accept this at its face value, right? Test these intelligently and carefully before you accept it. Now, I thought that was a phenomenal statement to find inside a Purana, right? Inside what we think as a spiritual text, whereas they are most spiritual, they say, oh, you have to just accept it. Here is a text that says, question everything, including what you're reading in the scriptures, right? And I thought that was such a powerful statement.
Absolutely.
And it shows the questioning mentality and the scientific mentality of the ancients, Indian ancients, and of our texts. And I use the word science because in science, you never accept anything at face value. Right?
We don't.
If after questioning, I perform an experiment to satisfy myself, even if my experiment is right, I ask somebody else in a different laboratory to perform the same experiment. Unknowingly, I might have a bias that I might build into it. And if he has the same experiment and comes up with the same result, then I say, okay, then it's possible that this is correct, right? And that is testing that is a part of the scientific method. And that is what the Puranas talk about, testing intelligently and carefully before you accept everything as knowledge. So I thought that was really, I used that at the top of some of the quotes that I have as a very important quote for us, for our side.
Indeed. Mr. Ganesh, could you share some message with my viewers, please?
Definitely. I hope. Firstly, thanks again, Hemali, for letting me be a part of your YouTube platform. And I hope I can leave your viewers with at least a part of my passion for the Puranas, and also to let them know that the Puranas are not just a collection of stories. The Puranas are a collection of knowledge. They are a collection of, and as a person interested in solar science, I found such deep knowledge, right, about the sun, right, and a lot of other things, right. I'm sure if there were medical professionals who went and read the Puranas, they would find a lot of very detailed information. I'm guessing, right, because right. Similarly, if there were architects, they'd find something on Vastu Shastra, or other people who are very good at astronomy, who maybe they can find some more about it. So my thing is that my request is that your audience reevaluate the Puranas as a treasure of knowledge, and go back and explore it, and make that whatever they find, make that knowledge available for the benefit of all of mankind. Yeah, so that would be my request.
That is such a lovely message, Mr. Ganesh. Thank you so very much for gracing the channel and sharing your insights on this topic, and to make us also think about, not looking at the Puranas as a storybook, rather as a treasure of knowledge. Viewers, if you're interested in buying his book or to read more about this topic, you may order the book that he has authored, which is From the Beginning of Time, and it is on Amazon.com. I'll be adding on the link in the description for his book, as well as for his YouTube channel. Thanks a lot to you guys for watching the episodes on my channel. And just to let you all know, my subscriber base has reached to a 273. How? Well, it all happened because of you all and your constant support. Keep liking and subscribing and sharing the videos ahead. And let's inspire as many people as we can as we move ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Ganesh Swaminathan. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much, Hemali. Thanks. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope your viewers enjoyed as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.